So, you want to make a Fanganronpa? If so, I hope you've watched the other 4 episodes of this series, because this is the last one. I've chosen some comments you guys have left on the previous videos, and I'm going to try my best to answer them. As such, this video doesn't have much of an overarching theme. It's just things that I couldn't really cover in the previous episodes. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Danganronpa.
What about making the title? In my opinion, a title should be something memorable and easy to promote, since it's going to be said every time your Fangen is referred to. I know Danganronpa has a habit of throwing 15 subtitles onto everything, but there's still a shortened version that's easy for people to remember and refer to it by. For example, New Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony goes by V3, and Super Danganronpa Another 2 has the abbreviation SDR2. Your title should be unique, so I would try and avoid overused words like hope or despair. Some of my personal favorite Fangen titles are Danganronpa F, Shattered Hope, and Danganronpa Heartless Deceit. When writing trials, how do you decide when and what minigames to include? This depends a lot on your format. Some formats don't even have minigames, while others have them but they aren't playable. Minigames are mostly a gameplay element, so they aren't incredibly important in terms of writing. My advice is to just space them out to keep the pace of the trial just right. They can really spice up a long stretch of dialogue, but throwing too many in at once can feel like we don't have a chance to breathe and take in the information that we're gathering. Study the canon games and see when they use what minigames for a good reference. I also received a couple questions about writing the Mastermind for a killing game. This is a pretty broad subject, but I'll try and condense my main tips. The first thing you should consider is if your Mastermind will be a participant or not. There's a slight misconception that every Mastermind has to be one of the students. While this has technically been true in every Danganronpa game, there is usually also a red herring or outside force that is contributing to the game as well, such as Alter Ego Junko in Danganronpa 2 or Team Danganronpa in V3. Having your Mastermind be outside the cast can be just as effective if you plant the seeds correctly. For example, Trigger Happy Havoc implies that the Mastermind may be the headmaster of Hope's Peak. This turns out to be false, but it's an example of how you can feasibly plant clues to someone aside from the cast pulling the strings. I don't think every story needs a twist villain to be good. Sometimes just taking down a straightforward bad guy is as satisfying as dealing with a traitor. Check out Danganronpa Defiance if you want an example of how to do an quote-unquote obvious mastermind correctly, as that Fangen's mastermind is revealed right at the end of Chapter 1. If your mastermind is part of the cast, odds are they will either survive until they reveal at the end, or fake their death earlier in the game. The method you choose matters less than how it is executed. A good twist should recontextualize a character, and make us view them in a different light than we had up until that point, while still making sense with what we've seen of them up to the reveal. In my opinion, one of the better examples in the canon games was Hajime. The reveal that he is Izuru puts into context the lack of his memory and talent without erasing those traits of his as being quote-unquote just an act. Regardless if the mastermind is obvious or a twist, what matters more than any of that is that they are a good character. That we know why they're doing what they are, and that we get satisfaction in bringing them down, since the whole game has somewhat led up to this. This confrontation is usually where your theme comes back into play. Your protagonist represents one side of the theme, while the mastermind embodies the other. There is an ideological clash, and the protagonist has to prove why they should follow their side. It's hard to give general advice on this, since masterminds are a very case-by-case thing, but I hope this was at least some general guidance. Taking a small break from advice questions, I've been asked a couple of times about my own Fangen that I've alluded to a few times in this series. My Fanganronpa was Danganronpa Redemption, or Redemption-ronpa. It follows Kaede as the protagonist, along with 15 other students who had died in the canon games, as they're suddenly placed into a brand new one, with no idea how they're even alive or what to make of their strange but all too familiar situation. I'll link it in the card and description if you'd like to check it out. Redemption was on Instagram and YouTube and ran from March 2020 to September 2022. I started it when I was still a teenager in high school who had never written something like that before, so it's not my best work, especially at the start. But it got an incredible amount of support and attention, for which I will always be grateful. This leads us nicely into the next question, which is asking how to make a Fangen that features the canon characters after their games have happened. There's a few ways one could do this, but my recommendation is to take this as an opportunity to expand on a character trait or aspect of them that wasn't fully explored in canon. For example, Hyoko is a common character who is brought up as having died with a ton of potential. As I've said previously, understand your cast first, but after that, as long as it's engaging and well written, don't stress yourself out too much about repeating the same arcs they had in canon, or sticking 100% to what is confirmed. After all, Fangens like that are just really elaborate fanfictions. So as long as it makes sense with what's canon and is in character, you can take them just about anywhere that would make a good story. Do you have any advice or tips on animating a body discovery, and if possible, could you do a brief demonstration on how to do one or what is needed? I do actually have some tips on how to do this. Admittedly, my method is pretty simple. I don't use super high-tech software, just a BDA photo and CapCut, but this should give you something close enough to what you're looking for. How do you come up with fitting executions and motives? Do you have any tips for choosing the location? I'll touch on executions in the next question, so for now, let's focus on deciding motives and location. Location is important to the atmosphere of your Fangen. For example, the lockdown school of Trigger Happy Havoc has a more claustrophobic feel than the open islands of Danganronpa 2. However, Danganronpa 2's location's size allowed for more unique and creative murder scenes, such as the funhouse in Chapter 4. It all depends on your project and what tone you're going for, as well as how you plan to incorporate the settings into the writing and cases. As for motives, this is a pretty broad subject. I've touched on them briefly in my episode about writing, but your motive should shake up the status quo of the current cast. Even if it doesn't tie directly into the murder, like in Chapter 3 of V3, it should still cause a shift in the group, like how Angie was planning on using the Necronomicon, and how it tied into the student council plot. As promised, now let's talk about executions. In terms of the art direction, you can watch the last episode for a little bit of advice. But, to summarize, executions can range from anything from just a written description to animatics to fully animated scenes. These will probably require the most art, so keep that in mind in terms of your project's scale. In terms of writing an execution, the canon series features a variety of different types of executions. Some are darker and more realistic, while others feature over-the-top set pieces and are more of a spectacle. Some feature the character's talent heavily, while others don't acknowledge it at all. So, how do you decide what to do? Well, my recommendation is to remember what an execution is supposed to do, and that's to bring the guilty student despair. One of the best examples of this, and the one I'm going to dissect here as an example, was Celeste's execution in Trigger Happy Havoc. Celeste has established up to this point that what she values is glamour and spectacle. Her outfit is very pretty and elaborate, and she claimed her motive for gathering money was to buy a castle and have a bunch of attractive male servants wait on her hand and foot. So, in her death, it seems like she may finally be getting what she wants. She's set up to be burned at the stake, and it's framed like this elegant execution fit for a queen. However, this is spun on its head when Monokuma instead drives a fire truck directly into the fire, killing Celeste in the impact. Those final moments, although we don't see Celeste's expression, are implied to be her worst nightmare, being killed in a vehicular accident, a simple and common way to die. Other examples of this are Leon being killed by baseballs, something he spent the whole game claiming to hate, and Kirumi having her drive and determination to survive shattered at the last possible moment, as she's shown there was never a way out for her. These are some of my favorite executions because, at their core, they prey on fear, dread, and despair. There's nothing inherently wrong with over-the-top executions either, but you should examine your project's tone and determine what would be the most impactful route to take with your executions. To close out, I'd like to read a couple of comments I've gotten from other Fangen creators that I think provide valuable advice. This one is from Vanta, and it says, "First of all, about themes of Fangens. Versus themes are definitely the most common since Danganronpa is a series that is very conflict-heavy. However, it is not required for your story, and you could have a completely separate main theme that has nothing to do with conflicting ideals. It's a bit more work, but seriously, it can really open doors creatively if you want to. Fangens are really formulaic, and that's perfectly okay, but there's nothing wrong with straying away from the tried-and-true formula. And trust me, the video doesn't lie. The more work you do in advance, the smoother the project will be for you. That's why I actually plan to finish my entire project before publishing the first post. It's going to take years, of course, but it'll all be worth it when it's actually done, and I'll no longer have to worry about missing the posting schedule." Finally, Fangens are a lot about that eating an elephant phrase. Don't expect to get giant loads of work done in just one day. Take your time and your Fangen will truly shine. I couldn't agree more. And this one from Tofu talks about mysteries and predictability. "In regards to writing a mystery, I just want to throw in my 2 cents quick. Predictability isn't a bad thing, and if people can solve your mysteries, that means you set it up well. Well-foreshadowed plot twists are better than shock value plot twists. That's not to say surprises aren't still good, but that's where red herrings come in to make the solvable truth less obvious. I know some people may feel bummed at first if a reader solves your case before you reveal the truth, but I think it's a much healthier mindset to feel happy and proud if you see someone solve your mystery." Again, these are just great points that I wanted to share. And that just about wraps things up. I really hope this series was helpful to all you aspiring Fangen creators out there. As one last little gift, I've created a worksheet that organizes a lot of the things I went over across the series. It's linked in the description, and if you'd like, you can fill it out, and it'll hopefully help with the process of planning and organizing your Fangen. In terms of going forward, I'd still like to make Fangen content in some way, I'm just not sure what. So please, let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. I do have one plan though, and it's an analysis on a certain Fangen that I really, really love. I hope to get it out soon. And even if it's not just Fangen content, I hope you'll stick around and check out my other videos in the future. Remember to like and subscribe, and I wish you all the very best with creating your Fangens.